Here on the channel we've covered all sorts of vintage computers with floppy disk drives, tape drives, and even CD drives, but we've never covered one with a built-in mini disc drive. Today is the day on Vintage Geek. Just a quick reminder, if you like what you see today, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps us a lot as we grow, and one of the things that helps us out the most is if you would consider becoming a Vintage Geek member. You can do that at the website, and for just under $20 a year, you get access to all of our video content commercial-free. It's at vintagegeek.com. Back in the 90s, when I was in high school, I was a huge music fan, and all of my friends were as well. And there was a lot of different formats available at the time, but by and large, most people either had cassettes or they had CDs. We didn't have a lot of great ways of sharing music at the time. There weren't the download services like Napster and those kind of things. Those would come later. We were pretty much limited to sharing cassettes or CDs with one another, and everyone wanted to make their own kind of mix, but there never was really a good way of doing it. I grew up in a relatively rural area, and we didn't have a lot of television commercials that would tell us about the latest and upcoming products and tech, so my way of finding out about new technology at the time was going on that occasional trip to the great electronics store in Denver, Colorado, which was known as Soundtrack, one of my favorite places to go when I was younger. They had all sorts of new technology at the time. They had computers, they had big screen TVs, they had DVD players, anything that you could imagine, they had it. Their prices weren't super great, but they did offer financing, which I appreciated. I remember very distinctly the first time that I saw MiniDisc. I thought that this was the answer to all of my prayers. You could record on it as many times as you wanted, and you could make your own track lists, you could separate the tracks out, and it was all digital, so you didn't have all that tape noise and all of the inherent difficulties you had with cassette. This was really, really cool, and I loved it immediately. The first time I saw one of these decks, I had to get one, and I got into MiniDisc pretty hard. I ended up getting the home recording unit to try to record music and make my own mix. I got the car unit to put in my Toyota Camry. Yep, it was pretty sweet. It had the actual MiniDisc in the in-dash unit, and it had a CD changer that you put in the trunk. This was really, really cool stuff at the time, and I absolutely loved the MiniDisc. I had so many MiniDiscs, absolutely loved the format. I also loved Sony products in general. It just felt like at the time that Sony was kind of the upper echelon of technology, and that applied to the Sony Vaio line of computers. In about 1999, I believe, I got my first Sony Vaio from Soundtrack, and it was a really great machine. Of course, I bought the bottom of the line Vaio unit. That's all I could afford, and even that unit had a lot of really cool features and bundled software. You could start burning your own CDs, which I was also doing, although the mini discs were a little bit more convenient. And you could just do a lot of cool things, some early video editing. So I was really a big fan of the Sony Vaio line of computers. I remember at the time going to Soundtrack and looking at all the computers on display. And of course, the Vaio line had many different versions. And as you went further up the line and the price went up higher, you got to some of the stuff that I never had a chance to play with. And one of those was the Sony Vaio model that actually had a mini disc player built into the actual computer. And I thought that that was the coolest thing I had ever seen. I didn't have the $3,000 it took at the time to buy this, but thanks to the magic of the internet and eBay, I actually have one of these units now for the very first time. This is the Sony Vaio model PCV MXS10, and this particular Vaio does have the built-in mini disc deck, as well as a built-in FM tuner. It has built-in video capabilities, and it has a built-in DVD-ROM and CD burner. This would have been the creme de la creme of computer at the time, something I never could have touched, and I've always wanted to know what the experience was like of having MiniDisc built into the computer. I never got to experience what they later called NetMD. Now that was basically Sony's answer of putting MiniDisc in the computer environment. And this was kind of their way of saying, hey, you don't have to go out and buy an iPod. You can just use the MiniDisc, which you already have, and you can download your favorite music and you can put them directly onto the MiniDisc using your PC. Very similar to using an iPod at the time with iTunes or something like that. And this was their answer to that particular problem. Obviously that didn't pan out for Sony, otherwise we would see mini discs being used everywhere. The iPod and the digital download generation took over, and we've never seen the same thing since. But the curiosity factor for me is huge. So I want to talk a little bit about this particular Sony Vaio, the components that went into it, try out the Vaio for ourselves, and see what it's like to try to take audio from a mini disc and put it directly on the hard drive. So let's get into it. This particular machine actually came with its own built-in 40-watt amplifier that's in the case of the unit, and it was used to power power a couple of external speakers. This is the first computer I've ever seen that actually didn't have separate powered speakers that would plug into it. In this case, you're literally just taking the speaker wire and going from a set of terminals in the back of the case to connect these external speakers to it. I think that that's really unique. I'm a little bit curious why they decided to do that. They thought it was a good idea to put this audio amp inside the chassis. It probably produces a lot of heat, but hey, I'm not one of the Sony engineers, so what do I know? It also came with a matching keyboard and mouse. This would have been similar to the Vaio keyboard and mouse that I had with my own systems back in the day. Unfortunately, the ones we got with this, we did test out and they're not working for some reason. I'm not sure if that's because of the PS2 ports on the system being non-functional, but it works fine with the USB keyboard, so we're probably going to use that for the demonstration today. Other than that, the items that came with this package included the original installed discs from Sony, so at some point I could go back and do a fresh install exactly as this thing came out of the factory with all of the included software. I want to say there's 6 or 7 CDs that you use to do that, and it did come with a remote control. A lot of these Vaio units came with that, so you could kind of use it as your home media center. You'd be able to play audio and video files and things like that and use a remote control, presuming that you had this connected somewhere to a television. It did come with a number of different accessories. The condition of this unit overall is not super. It looks like it was used pretty heavily. That makes sense to me because this was a very expensive computer, and obviously whoever would have bought it originally would have wanted to use it to its maximum potential. That means that certain things over time have deteriorated. The little flap that opens up on the front that has access to the USB port and some of the other things has been velcroed back on. The actual hinge is not intact anymore. One of the speaker grills is actually falling off, and we kind of had to tape it back together to get it to be presentable for today's shoot. Other than that, the machine does seem serviceable. It boots up, and I think we're going to be able to do some good experiments with it today. So I definitely want to jump into it and see what this Vaio is all about here on Vintage Geek.
Hi!
I've got the Vaio booted up and ready to play with here, and I'm really excited about this. Just the feeling of nostalgia. Obviously, I've had Vaio computers, but I've never had one of this caliber. Of course, this machine does have Windows XP on it. That's what it would have shipped with originally. Even just a first glance at the start menu here, Sony was pretty notorious for putting a ton of programs that they packaged with their computers already, and it looks like whoever the user of this was before installed a lot of things on this machine. I want to take a look at some of the things that this computer has to offer that were specific to this model. And of course, the most important part of that is the MiniDisc functionality. But before I even get to that, it has a memory stick slot built into it. Now, that was a Sony proprietary format, and obviously you wouldn't find a memory stick input on most computers, so it's kind of a novelty. And I thought it'd be kind of fun, just as a first experiment with the machine, to actually put in the memory stick that we have from our Sony Handycam that we used back when we were doing the Mac Vision video. We had captured a few still images, and I just kind of wanted to see what the experience would be like to pop that into the slot on the front of this Vaio and just see what it comes up with. All right, so it gives me some options of what to do with the pictures here. I can print the pictures, but I don't have a printer here, so that's probably not going to work. Let's just look at them in Windows Explorer. I think that's probably the safest option here. Here's some pictures. Now, we're starting out with the default frame images that came with the Handycam. These were so that you could put cool frames around your awesome 90s photos. But we've got some pictures here that we took as well. There's our image of the Lisa, the Vintage Geek coffee mug. Again, we used this for a previous video. Looks like it reads the memory stick exactly as I would expect it to. We've got some pretty cool images of our Apple section here at the museum. A couple of photos of our Macworld and Insider magazine. And there I am. Yeah, memory stick functionality looks good on this, and very easy to use. You can just put it right in the front panel and read it directly. So I guess that was the advantage of having a number of Sony components in your household, that you could just kind of interchange between the different formats. So I like that. Of course, this particular model, having the built-in 40-watt amplifier and these kind of giant speakers for the time, should be a pretty good experience for playing back sounds and sound files. So before we even get into the MiniDisc, let's just see what that looks like. For pretty much anything to do with audio and extracting audio, they used a program called Sonic Stage. This particular machine has Sonic Stage Premium, and because this machine has a built-in FM tuner, it's actually going to ask me if I want to scan for FM frequencies when we open this. This is the Sonic Stage Premium Digital Music Manager. There's that FM station auto scan. I don't have an antenna hooked up currently, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Welcome to Sonic Stage Premium. You can play and record music easily using the source icons. Let's go ahead and just try to play some audio first. Now, we've got these different icons at the top, and it looks like we've got the Sony drive here, which looks like the computer itself, at least the icon does. I feel like we've lost some of this over the years as far as just icons and the way that they look, but I think it's cool when things actually have kind of this shadow effect. Like if I drag the cursor over this, it actually makes it kind of pop out from the screen. You don't see a lot of that in modern design, and I kind of appreciate it now. Same thing happens when I scroll over these other sources. Now obviously there's no CD in the drive right now, so that's why this is kind of grayed out, and there's no mini disc in that slot either. But we do have the memory stick, which must have been what it was giving me the copyright protection error about, I have to assume. Then you've got an FM option here, so this would be how you'd bring up the tuner. I assume you could actually record directly from the tuner device. And then you've got an external input control here too, so if you were feeding some other source into the computer, you could record from that as well. Let me go ahead and open up the drive here and see what we've got as far as music to play. If I go to show list, I can see what the different samples are. Sample 1 and sample 2. Let's just make sure that this plays. I actually don't know what this is. Sounds pretty good. The speakers are both working, which is great. If I go to sample 2, more violin work there. Sonic Stage is also kind of Sony's answer to Windows Media Player. Now, of course this is XP, so Windows Media Player does exist on this machine, but I really think that Sony packaged this to be the kind of end-all solution for all things media on the PC. I've got my mini disc here. This is from my personal collection, and the one I found is actually pretty interesting because it's labeled newscasts, commercials, and other things with my name on it. I assume these were things that I recorded when I was doing radio, early samples of that, so I'm actually pretty curious to see what's on this, and I'm gonna put this in now and see what Sonic Stage does with the mini disc. Let's take a look at this. I assume we can just play the audio directly as we did with the audio file earlier, so we'll try that first.
20 family members and close friends offered comments during the meeting. According to Davison, a showcase honoring officers killed in the line of duty is already in place. The city of Fort Morgan will continue to use Colorado mosquito control for at least another year. The proposal of $50,750 was approved on a vote of 6-1.
So this is in fact audio of when I was on the radio when I was about 16 years old. Doing the news director position for a station in my hometown. It's pretty cool to hear it. Now obviously the audio quality is a little bit lacking. That's because this would have been recorded literally off of the radio. The idea was to use the Sony MiniDisc boombox that I had, which actually had the capability of doing timed recordings off of radio broadcasts. So I'm sure at the time I probably just wanted to air check myself and see what it really sounded like on the air, so I probably set a timed recording to record the newscast that I was doing live. Here's our list of tracks. Of course, none of them are actually labeled, which makes sense. I probably would have never taken the time to do that at the time. Or now. Let's take a quick look at what else is on this particular disc.
Nitro Productions presents the Budweiser 2001 Shootout Truck and Tractor Pull. Coming to the Morgan County Fairgrounds Saturday, August 4th at 7 p.m. with 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive, Pro Stock, Econo, Modified, and the local street competition starting at 6 p.m. Call 867-8879 for more information.
You know, I probably thought this production was really excellent at the time. And hearing it back now, it's a little bit dated, but hearing it again after all these years on the mini disc is actually pretty neat. It's nice to know that the disc itself and the integrity and everything holds up over time. It's a really interesting unit overall, and I do like the Sonic Stage software. I've never seen the premium before. Certainly I've never seen anything with mini disc built in, and obviously all of the other features of Sonic Stage as well. Very powerful machine for the time. It's a great example of a very expensive Sony Vaio computer from 2002, and one that I missed out on at that point in my computer skill development. But it's really cool to see this now and be able to get some firsthand experience with it, and I'm hoping to do a little bit more with this over time. Just a reminder, if you like content about vintage computers like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps us a lot as we grow, but one of the things that helps us out the most is if you would consider becoming a Vintage Geek member. You can do that at the website, and for just under $20 a year, you get access to all of our video content commercial-free, plus some add-on goodies and bonuses as well. It's all at vintagegeek.com. Until next time, I'm Aaron, and this has been Vintage Geek.